Hi, this is a walkthrough of the application of the Jersey City Arts Council's Individual Artist Fellowship Program, which is supported by the Jersey City Arts and Cultural Trust Fund. This grant is for individual artists. There are other grants available through the Arts and Cultural Trust for arts organizations, and links for those grants can either be found on the Jersey City Cultural Affairs website or through this link here on our own Artist Fellowship page. But right now we're going to focus on the Individual Artist Fellowship. I'll walk you through the guidelines in the application and point out things to note as you're applying. So let's jump in. The goal of the fellowship program is to provide residents of Jersey City who are exploring a career in the arts with an unrestricted grant to support and supplement their creative output over the year. Awards recognize exceptional creative work and the impact and engagement of the artist within the local community. And the application link is found at the bottom of this page, and we will get there eventually. The Jersey City Arts Council is looking to award up to 20 grants of $5,000 each, and the expectation is that all grants will be at that $5,000 level, that there won't be different amounts awarded. Eligibility: applicants must meet all of the requirements below. You must be a resident of Jersey City, at least 18 years old, and not enrolled as a full-time student. You must be an artist creating new work during the grant period, and you must expect to maintain residency in Jersey City throughout the award period. Applicants will be asked to submit a proof of residency as part of the application, and we will get to that shortly. And finally, once an artist has been selected for an award, they cannot apply again for another fellowship for at least 2 years. The deadline for the application is March 28th, 2022, and the grant period will be from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. So please note, March 28th is the absolute deadline to get your applications in. So now we've got our application requirements. These are all elements that you will be asked to include in your application. The first one is the proof of residency. Grants are only available to residents of Jersey City, as we stated above, and applicants are required to submit proof of residency, which can be a photo of your driver's license or a photo ID, a photo of your current lease, rent, or mortgage statements. And if none of these are available, another household bill with your name or address will be acceptable. We understand that providing proof of residency can be tricky in the city, so if you can't provide any of the listed options, feel free to send us an email or contact us, and we can look at some other options. Also, please note that working out of a studio in Jersey City doesn't qualify for the residency requirement. You have to live in the city. Next is an artist statement. Now, not all art forms are familiar with artist statements, so for those who aren't, it's basically a brief written intro to you as an artist, told in your voice, adding insight and context to your creative work. It can take on different formats depending on the artist and the art form, so if you haven't written one before, I suggest searching for some examples online. On the application itself that we'll get to, we do have a link to some examples, but that's not a definitive list. There are many more online you can find with an easy search. Then you've got the community impact statement. So your community impact statement should describe how you participate in, contribute to, and are impacted by Jersey City and the larger arts community. For example, some things you could include here are if you're part of a local arts group, or if you perform locally, or work with local arts organizations, or teach an art class. You could also share if you attend shows and exhibits at local venues, or if you purchase art or support local nonprofits. But also, you don't have to only include how you contribute to the arts. You can also share other ways you participate in the larger Jersey City community. For example, if you're active in your neighborhood association, or if you volunteer locally or participate in non-arts related community events. You can include things like that as well, especially if they've had an impact on your creative work. We also have a fellowship statement, which will describe how this grant would impact your work. Perhaps there are specific opportunities for you as an artist that this grant would provide. This would be the place to share some info like that. Next is the direct public benefit. Because the trust is funded through a citywide tax, all fellowship recipients will need to include a direct public benefit that provides a free public arts program of some kind to the Jersey City community. Now, there are a variety of potential free arts programs applicants could propose. We've listed some examples in the guidelines, though it's not at all a comprehensive list, again. But some options could be gallery shows, film viewings, theater, music, or dance performances, online digital portfolios, creative classes, studio tours, or workshops. Since you know your work best, and we expect a wide variety of proposals in the applications, there aren't a lot of restrictions on what you can propose. You can be creative in your direct public benefit, but remember that you, the artist, will be responsible for organizing, producing, and managing whatever that programming is. So it's important to be realistic in what you can manage and don't propose anything you wouldn't be able to follow through on. The Arts Council will be available to help with promotion of that public benefit, but the responsibility would fall on you as the grant recipient to produce the public benefit. Next is artist work samples. You can submit up to 5 samples of your work for the application. Samples will vary widely depending on your art form, but could include photos or digital images of your work, Word documents, audio or video recordings, graphics. There are many options, but feel free to email us if any of the options or opportunities to upload here don't work for your art form. One thing to note, though, is that there's a 10 megabyte limitation for file sizes for your work samples. If your samples are larger than that, which many video recordings might be, for instance, then you'll need to upload them to a publicly accessible website and submit a PDF with hyperlinks to where you've uploaded your samples. To clarify, the PDF with hyperlinks is to help us ensure that none of those hyperlinks are being altered or lost as reviewers are looking at applications. And then to clarify what a publicly accessible website means is that's a site that doesn't require a password or permission to view. For example, we don't want to get a link to a file in a Google folder, click on it and find out we need to request access or permission to view the file. Please remember that applications are going to be reviewed by a group of reviewers. We want to ensure that none of them will have trouble opening your work. We want everyone to be sure that they're seeing your complete application. Then we move on to the review process. So the review process will primarily be done in 2 parts. First, there's a review panel made up of applicants to the Arts and Cultural Trust's grant review panel. If you end up deciding not to apply for a fellowship, we encourage you to apply to be a grant review panelist. There's honorariums for serving that, and grant review panelists will have a lot of input into arts funding through the Arts and Cultural Trust. So the first step is that the fellowship will be reviewed by a group of review panelists with experience in that area. The next step is that Jersey City Arts Council Board will consider the scores and recommendations from the review panel and then make final recommendations for grants to ensure a broad range of artistic disciplines as well as diversity across race, gender, and the wards of Jersey City. Finally, follow-up reporting. The Individual Artist Fellowship is an unrestricted grant, which means that grantees get to determine how to use funds. At the end of the grant cycle, though, as part of follow-up reporting, we're asking for an overview of how funds were spent, hopefully allowing us to get a better sense of where areas of need are in the community. And grantees will also need to submit a report on their direct public benefit and any information, including pics and videos, of any shows, performances, or other presentations during the grant cycle. So once you've gone through all of the guidelines and reviewed those, you're ready to start the application. You click on this button here, apply for the Individual Artist Fellowship. It takes you to the application page. There's a couple things to note before you dive into the application. First is that if you're having trouble viewing the entire application, note that there are 2 sets of scroll bars to go through the application. That's because technically the application is sitting inside a widget on this web page. So to scroll through the application itself, you'll use this internal scroll bar, which will take you through the entire application. The other thing to note is that the application doesn't have the ability to save a partially completed application. If you click away from or close your application before clicking on the submit button, you'll lose any information that you've input already. So I strongly, strongly recommend typing out your application in a Word document first and copying and pasting what you need to into the application. Make sure you're saving your application as you're working through it. All right, only fully and completed eligible submissions will be accepted. If you're missing anything from your application, it won't be accepted. So the application is pretty straightforward. You enter your name, first name, last name. If you have a performing or professional name, you can include that. You input your address, and we require what ward in Jersey City you live in. If you're unfamiliar with it, you can search online. This link should have a map of the wards of Jersey City, but then you'll click and select there. Next is the proof of residency. We already went over this for the most part. And again, email if you have issues with this. But when you're ready to submit, you have two options. You can either drag and drop your proof of residency to this drop file section, or you can click on this attach file button, and this window will open up, and you can make sure that the paperclip icon is selected in My Device. And if you click, you can select a file and upload it into your application. Also, please make sure that it's a PDF or a JPEG attachment. As we continue through, your email, your phone number, and then we get to artist website. You can list up to 3 sites here, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a website you've built dedicated to your work. It can be a social media account or some kind of online portfolio. For example, a SoundCloud page with your music, an Instagram account of visual art, a YouTube channel with videos. Any of those or anything similar is acceptable. Just make sure that it's a site dedicated to your creative work and not a personal social media account. That's not what we're looking for. They're looking to see examples of your work. Also, if you're including multiple sites, please make sure each starts on its own line, meaning enter a site, hit return, enter the next site, hit return. Next, you'll need to select which branch of the arts you primarily work in. This list has been set at the state level. It's not a list that the city or the Arts Council put together, but it isn't meant to be restrictive. It is just establishing the broad categories that qualify to apply. So just select the one that it most closely applies to your artwork. If your artwork doesn't correlate to any of these categories, you can select other and type in a category for yourself. All right, then we come on to the required elements, the statements, your artist statement. We've got the link to examples here if you're unfamiliar with artist statements. Your community impact statement is here, your fellowship impact statement, and the direct public benefit description. So all of these, you can type and enter your statements directly into these boxes. And again, we recommend first initially typing everything out into a Word document that you can save, and then copying and pasting those statements into the boxes here. The artist work samples is next. We already went over it, but remember, if you have any troubles, email us. You can click on the attach file button here and select samples to include. Again, we encourage you to email us if you have any questions about uploading work samples. It's really hard to account for all the potential samples here, but we want to make sure that we receive them. Next, we have artist work sample description. For each of the samples you submitted above, please provide the name of the piece, the year it was created, the medium, any collaborators, and a brief description of the piece. And this could also be a place to provide any additional context for your work samples if you want to. Again, you'll input that directly into the text box. The next section is quick demographic questions, which are pretty straightforward. Select your responses for each. And then finally, an attestation statement, which is just a checkbox and states that you've been truthful in your application, and if selected, will fulfill all of the requirements and the fellowship guidelines. And when you're done, you click submit, and that's it. So I hope this walkthrough has been helpful. You can always email us. Our email address is here, jerseycityartscouncil@gmail. Email us if you have any questions. You can also sign up for updates from us, including updates on the fellowship program and other programs and funding opportunities through the Arts Council.